about offering extra credit if people will like go around and evangelize that and get 15 signatures of people who will say, yes, I saw it, and yes, I will tell 15 other people. Because every time I drive in that parking lot, I just about get plowed. I'm going to die in that parking lot. How much extra credit? I haven't decided yet. How much do you need?
I'm thinking maybe like a few thousand points. 1 million.
Wow.
You gotta realize that all rules go out the window when a student's trying to find a parking spot 60 seconds before class.
I was driving straight the other day, like through a light, a green light, and the person turning right has to wait.
Yeah.
They're at a stoplight. 1 lane road, and I almost got crashed into.
Just like a one-lane road, right?
I was angry.
Yeah, I hate people. People suck.
People just can't drive for me.
There are way too many of them in my space, right? Okay, so everybody, we're starting Blender today. Let me give you just a little bit of the background of Blender, kind of what's going on here so you understand, A, why this is free. That's kind of weird, right? Blender's main competition, Maya, of course, we've talked about. 3ds Max is another 3D package owned also by Autodesk. Softimage was purchased by Autodesk and has been discontinued. The technology has been folded into Maya and 3ds Max, but those were kind of the 3 big names in the 3D modeling and animation industry, the 3 big commercial packages. So why is Blender free when those cost thousands of dollars? They do. You'll be into Maya almost $6,000 to get plugins and everything you need to actually get started. What's that?
It's open source.
It is open source. Yes. How did that come to be? It was not made from scratch that way. Okay, many studios create proprietary. You probably know this word already, but I'll write it down. Anyway, proprietary software. They have their own tools. Okay. Pixar, actually, if you go to work for Pixar, you're not going to use Maya, you're not going to use 3ds Max, not going to use Blender, you're going to use Pixar's internal animation tool. They have their own software and only they use it. Okay? There are a lot of studios that do that. One such studio existed in the 90s in the Netherlands. I can't remember the name of it right now. But they went out of business. Their software had been primarily developed in-house by a gentleman by the name of Ton Roosendaal. How's that for a Nordic name? T-O-N, Ton Roosendaal. And he basically, before there were really Kickstarter campaigns, he went online and made a plea and said, you know, this company's going belly up. They own the intellectual property to what I think is a great 3D modeling and animation package. And I would really like to see this have a life beyond this company, which is about to die. If the online community can scrape together $100,000, this company says they'll open source the software. And it happened. They actually managed to raise the money. The software became open source, and Blender was born. Okay. Since then, Blender has been the subject of it's owned by what's called the Blender Foundation. Ton Roosendaal is at the head of it still today. And their development model is kind of interesting. And this has not been throughout their entire history, but they release a new version of Blender every 3 months, like clockwork. And it happens. They do. We have 2.77a on these machines. In a few weeks, 2.78 will be available. At any given time, you can also go, since it's open source, you can go and compile whatever they've been working on and see how it works. So you can use the future version of Blender, including all the bugs they haven't worked out. Now, if you go to blender.org and look at their website, you can see that the release candidate for 2.78 is actually available for download. That's what I've been using in my office. Usually release candidates are fairly stable. And 2.78 is going to have some pretty cool features that not even 2.77a has. So that's going to be cool. But one other thing that they do to spur development on is every 2 years they create what's called a Blender Open Movie. And basically what they do is they gather donations and grants from various countries, film institutes and things like that. They hire a bunch of studios to use just Blender and to whatever extent they can to use just open source software to create a short film. The idea being that whenever the animators and modelers run into a limitation of the software and say, gosh, it would sure be nice if Blender could do this, they also have a team of developers handy who say, okay, and they get to coding. And at the end of it, there's a short film for everybody to enjoy. They publish the film as well as all the assets. You can download, the models and the animation sequences, remix the film yourself, the music, everything. At the end of the film, end of the production period, there's a film that everybody can have. There's also a new version of Blender with a bunch of new features coming out. So every 2 years, it kind of gets a real push ahead, and every summer it also gets entered in the Google Summer of Code. So new features usually come out after the summer as well. What I'm going to show you now is one of the open movies that they came out with. This is the most family-friendly one they've done. Since there is definitely a European sensibility to a lot of the films they do, and they are not necessarily family-friendly in the way that Americans think of family-friendly. So this one's generally okay. You've probably seen footage from this. This is from 2012. You've probably seen footage from this being used to advertise HD TVs. The sound kind of sucks. In Best Buy. This is used as a tech demo a lot because it's free. It's more family friendly than the others. How about that? This is all before Blender had the cycles renderer, by the way, which we talked about a little bit. That's the unbiased renderer they're using now. This gets really gory for a second here. We all knew that one kid in elementary school, right? All right, so that's the kind of thing that they do once every 2 years. Sometimes they'll always have a particular emphasis. The one after this is it's kind of a real downer of a story, but it's about a girl and a dragon, and it's beautifully animated, but it's kind of like, oh, that was sort of sad. Then after that, oh, you know what? That was from 2008. Sorry, that was not 2012. In 2012, they concentrated on motion capture and compositing with live action videos, so they actually filmed live actors and put 3D elements in with them. And the most recent one was really kind of showcasing the cycles editor or cycles renderer and getting things put together there. But it drops the F-bomb, so I decided, maybe we don't need that in class. But it's also beautifully animated and really kind of a weird story, just like. Who wrote this? All right. So, what's that?
Where would you find it?
Blender.org would be a good place to look, or just Google them for Blender Open Movie.
Okay.
So under Applications, you should now have Blender 2.77a. This is what the icon looks like. If you fire that up here, Blender is going to use much of the same language as far as like the parts of objects. We're going to use vertices. We're going to use edges. And we're going to use faces. We're going to use polygons. We're going to use primitives. Much of what we've learned in Maya so far will translate across directly. What's going to be quite different is the interface. Blender starts you off with a default cube, which Maya starts you off with a blank scene. Blender starts you off with a cube. It's kind of sixes. Sometimes you'll use the cube, sometimes you won't. It's pretty easy to delete. One of the real advantages that Blender has over other industry packages is that since it was developed in-house, it doesn't really try to look like anything else, and the windowing scheme is extremely powerful. It'll take a little bit of getting used to, but it's extremely powerful. You're not going to have a lot of floating windows up getting in the way that will lose focus when you click away from them, like the way the outliner, for instance, or Hypershade works in Maya or in 3ds Max for that matter. You're not going to have that because any window, any part of the interface in Blender can become any other part of the interface. Blender is also very, very keyboard centric. Okay? You can do everything with a mouse, but if you learn a few keyboard shortcuts, it's extremely fast. So modeling can be very, very quick. To that end, I'm going to turn on, I'm going to take you into the user preferences first, actually. Matter of fact, let's turn this back off so you can see a little bit better. You'll notice Blender has its own menuing system here. But basically, we're just going to have these 4 options no matter what we're doing in Blender. It's not going to expand and contract and change like what we were looking at before with Maya. And please don't think I'm bagging on Maya when I say this. One of our biggest problems here was the versions that we were dealing with, not Maya itself. It's a very, very wonderful, capable package. I think Blender is going to be a better fit for us. So if you go to the File menu, you have this little User Preferences section here, and Blender just has these user preferences. There are a few things that I always change every single time. Okay? One of which, you might remember, we started off by zooming to the mouse position in Maya. We changed that. So if you click on Interface here, you'll see that that's an option. Zoom to mouse position. I also like to check Rotate Around Selection. So I always check those two. And then under Input, you'll notice it has this Select Width. And it's set to right. right-clicking selects in Blender. That, to me, I've never been able to get used to it. It's weird. A lot of people swear by it. I haven't noticed any problem, even watching tutorials and things like that, I haven't noticed any problem with switching it around. So I always select with the left so that it feels a little more natural. So I'm not going into an Adobe application and trying to select with my right mouse button because I've been using Blender. So if you hit that and then click on Save User Settings, don't just close the window, click Save User Settings, then you'll have basically the same interfaces I'm going to use. Yes?
Mine just barely started up. Could you go through the
Sure thing. Yeah, so if yours just barely started up, go to File, User Preferences, and then under Interface, check these two boxes, zoom to mouse position and rotate around selection, and under Input, click Select with left, and then click Save User Settings. Now I'm going to go one further. You guys do not need to do this right now. But under Add-ons, oh, it's not in there. Okay, hold on. Oh, I might have been calling it the wrong thing. Under Add-ons, nope, just gonna have to download it. Okay. So Blender uses a Python-based plugin system, which means if you know any Python code, you can actually make your own add-ons for Blender. One of which used to be included, but is no longer, is this screencast keys thing. And I am going to download it. Oh.
What does it do?
What it does is it throws the, did they do away with my right click or something? Nope. It throws, it displays whatever button I'm pushing up on the screen. So while I'm pushing buttons, you'll be able to see what button I push on the keyboard in case I forget to mention it. Basically, this is just for your benefit. Okay, so I just downloaded that. I'm going to say I want to install an add-on from a file. Go to my downloads. There's my screencast keys. Put a little checkbox on there, and now I'm going to save user settings. But one thing I just want to point out before I close this window, Blender comes with hundreds of add-ons. And it will list their development status in here. You can see there are no check boxes next to any of these. Add curve, sapling. That is a really, really easy way to model trees. Blender comes with it. It's just not enabled by default. So if you come in here and start exploring and see something you want to play around with, you can just put a checkbox next to it and start playing with it. It's pretty cool. Import, export, Autodesk 3ds format. You can do a lot of things in here. Yes, sir?
How did you get, once you downloaded the file for the screen key?
I clicked on Install from File.
Oh.
And from there, I just navigate to where I downloaded it and double click on it. So I now have that enabled, and I'm going to save my user settings and close the window. Okay?
So what did that do now?
So what that does is, over here, I just tapped my N key if you're wondering what I did. Over here, I now have a special menu down here called Screencast Keys. I can click on Start Display, and that will now tell you what button I'm clicking. So you see the little mouse, how the middle button kind of illuminated?
Where do you hit start display?
Just right here. Start display, stop display. You guys don't need to do that because nobody else is looking at your monitor. Okay, this is just for your benefit that I'm putting that in. Okay, let's start with a little bit of the Blender interface. So you can see I just hit a couple keys here, N and T. What they did, N opens this little properties menu over here. This is an awful lot like the attributes editor was in Maya. Okay, I currently have this cube selected, if I deselect that, then it's no longer what I'm manipulating over here. But if I have that cube selected, you can see I've got an outliner right here, just like you do in Maya. I have several objects in my scene. I've got a camera, I've got a cube, and I've got a lamp, a default lamp. That's what this is. Okay, there's my default lamp. But if I have this, and I zoom the same way, by the way, with the middle mouse wheel, if I have this selected, then I've got all these parameters for it. Dimensions, for instance. It's 2 units by 2 units by 2 units. I can tell you, if you are 3D printing, a unit is a millimeter. Okay, otherwise you can think of it as a meter. 3D printer will scale things down by 1,000. But you can think of a unit as a meter, and things will come out fairly accurately, especially when you have to deal with real-world units. So each one of these little squares is a meter. Can you change Blender's units to imperial, so you're dealing with inches and feet? Yes, you can. We're not going to do that. Inches and feet are about the worst way to deal with units where you're having to get into decimals and things like that. We don't want to be getting into fractions here. We want to keep as much math out of this as we can. Okay, but if I want to move this, if I want to translate it, I have much the same controls as I did in Maya. Okay, I've got this little trident here, this gizmo, and I can translate it along an axis. It doesn't matter where I put my mouse. Right now it's only moving along the x-axis. Command Z will undo. Here's the y-axis because I just clicked on that one arrow, and here is Z. Now you may have noticed something different already. Z is up. Okay, Blender assumes that you are looking down, at whatever subject you're dealing with, okay, and that your depth axis is coming toward you as you're looking down. So Z is up, unlike with Maya, where Y was up. Okay, and that's fairly standard if you get into like CAD and machining and things like that. Z is usually up. So this should allow you to kind of transition to that sort of software a little easier. So that's how you move things. Now, you remember how W, E, and R in Maya were our move and our rotate and our scale hotkeys, our shortcuts. In Blender, it's a little different. R is rotate. S is scale. Anybody want to guess what move is? G. G, yeah. You have to remember this originated in the Netherlands. So G is move, and I always think of it as grab. Yep. G is grab. So if you tap on those keys, you'll get appropriate manipulators. The great thing about it is, and you might hate this, but I love it. When you tap one of these keys to start the tool, Blender loads your cursor with whatever is selected. Okay, it assumes you're going to work with it at whatever is selected. So rather than say, move tool, select, manipulate, you select, tool, manipulate. Okay, you select first. So if I tap R, and I just start moving my mouse, I'm already rotating. Okay, and it's not going to tumble nonsensically. It will only give me 2 axes of movement from my current point of view. Okay, so I'm looking flat on it this way. It's only going to move it as though I were looking straight down at the X and Y axis. So basically the X and Y axis of my camera. Now that may not make a lot of sense because, like, if I just pick an angle arbitrarily, you know, just wiggle my, and I'm doing this with a middle click, by the way. Middle click will tumble my view. If you shift middle click, it will pan. But if I just pick an arbitrary angle, then how much sense does it make for me to rotate according to my view? Well, it doesn't, really. It really doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're making something, just totally wanting to eyeball some artwork, which, again, in 3D is not usually a very good idea because you're eyeballing a two-dimensional space that's trying to represent a three-dimensional space. You can't actually represent depth there. Okay, it's going to be inaccurate. So the great thing is you can modify these commands. So G, if you want to move, you can also tell it with the keyboard. You can do a whole series of movements, scalings, rotations without ever touching the mouse. The mouse, believe it or not, is not going to be your friend in a precision operation like that. The mouse is how you eyeball things. It's an interface between your hand-eye coordination and what's happening on screen. So if you want to move, you specify tool, axis, and then quantity, I guess, or amount. So if I wanted to move this, how wide is this? Can anybody tell by looking at it?
A long way.
How big is this cube?
2 by 2 by 2.
2 by 2 by 2. Yeah, you can tell because of the grid, right? 2 by 2 by 2. So if I want to move it over exactly 1 cube's width, I need to move it 2 units, right? So if I want to do that in just the x-axis, what's my keyboard? I'm going to do G, X, 2, enter. Simple as that. Let's try it. G, X, 2, enter.
So you hold all three?
What's that?
Mine
You hold
deleted.
all three or what?
Say again.
Do you press and hold or do you just tap?
No, you just tap.
You don't actually have to do enter.
You do have to do enter if you want the command to exit. Yeah, otherwise it's waiting for your next key press because you could do GX20 and move it 20 units.
So how would you move it back? -2?
Yep, GX minus 2. It's simple geometry. So just same along the axis. And you'll notice, by the way, that our little properties panel over here, it updated, right? Our location in the X is now a +2, whereas before it was 0. +2. So we could also move it over there. If I want to move it 2 units in Y, I can just type that, 2 units, let's do -2 in Z, and suddenly we can go down. And we can move it with extreme precision that way. Okay, if you ever want to cancel out of a command before hitting enter, just hit escape. So escape will clear out your command, and you're going to use that a lot because sometimes you're going to want to see what a command would do. Sometimes you kind of need to dip your toes in the water a little bit.
It's like a preview of what you
Yeah,
kind of want to do, but not sure of yet.
yeah, exactly, a preview. So that's a good way to do it. And just remember that these commands load your cursor. Okay, you guys know what a loaded cursor is, right? You've had DES 1300, you've messed with the Adobe applications. InDesign in particular gives you a loaded cursor a lot. Basically, it loads your cursor with text, and the next place you click, the text spills back out. Okay, that's the same thing you're doing here. You're loading your cursor. Okay, so that N key gives us this property panel, as I mentioned, and you've got a lot of things over here. We're going to refer to this a lot. The odd thing is it is not open by default. Okay, I usually open it and leave it open, but if I need more space, I can close it down. Really, really simply with the N key. Okay, that opens and closes this guy. Now, what do you think of the interface here? What's your honest opinion? Is it pretty? Is it ugly? What do you think? How do you think it looks?
Dull but useful.
Dull. It does, doesn't it? Dull but useful. I think that's a good way to describe it. It's not the prettiest interface. Maya's a lot prettier, I think. You know, it's not the prettiest interface, but it is useful. It's functional, And I'll tell you what,
And it's
it
free.
looks so much better than it used to.
Yeah.
They went through a major overhaul in 2010 with Blender version 2.5, and you can still download the old versions 2.4. I think they just barely discontinued official support for Windows XP, so this will run on anything. If you've downloaded it at home, you've seen how big the download is. It's like 70 megabytes or something. I mean, this is really lean, efficient software. But it's just loaded with features, and Python, actually, the Python scripting language just helps it to be that lean. But version 2.4 and beforehand were absolutely mind-bogglingly confusing as far as how the interface worked. This is so vastly improved compared to what it was, but it's still not very pretty. But it gets a little better with each every 3 months. You know, they improve it a little bit. And you'll get used to it. You'll kind of grow to love it, I think. So if we ever, by the way, Scott, was it you? No, it was, let's see, Derek, who was asking at one point about background images. Okay, so for reference, and we're not there yet, but FYI, that's also in this panel over here. If you scroll all the way down, I'm going to close my screencast keys. You'll see I have this item that I control down called background images. I can check or uncheck that item in order to display or not display background images. And I just have one simple button in there right now, add image. Once I add an image, I have an open dialog to go and browse for an image. I have all kinds of options where you can add a reference image. And that's going to be huge if you want to start doing anything serious with Blender. Matter of fact, let me see if I can pull something up for you here. Just gonna be the splits and sound. Everybody. Someday I'm gonna be free. No? You know what? They were just so good. That's the problem. They were just so good.
Yeah, but there's so many others out there that are also just so good.
No, not as good. Not as good. That's the thing. Okay, so this is the one. Where'd it go? There we are. This is what I'm working on at home. So I thought you guys would appreciate this because we kind of have some Star Wars nerds in the class here. But so this is Yoda. There we go.
It's Obi-Wan.
It's Obi-Wan in his later years. Just found a couple of images online that I could kind of line up. You'll notice that I just have these scaled to about the same size. So when I turn my geometry back on, it starts to look proper. But anyway, I'm modeling Yoda, kind of just, everybody models Yoda, so I never have done it. I decided it was time to model Yoda. But
So you can do it from a movie clip as well?
you can use video, yes, for background images. It would be, if you just want like a reference from a video, then you would be better served to actually grab a still frame out of the video and bring it in. But if you want to like follow somebody's walk while you're animating or something like that, you can bring in a video as a reference image, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to reload my startup file here, and there's that little menu. Oh, my screencast keys are turned off again. Start display. There we go. So that's another one of the things that you can do with that properties menu over there. Now, off to the left, if you hit the T key, we get these this series of tool palettes over here. And they are also, I generally leave them open because they're super, super handy. You'll notice they're tabbed. Depending on what you have selected, you will get different tabs up there. Some of them will always stay the same. Some of them will be different So one of the tabs that we have over here is the Create tab. And these will probably look a little bit familiar to you. Add primitive. Okay? We have the opportunity here to create the same primitives with one at least notable exception that we were talking about in Maya. We have a plane, we have a cube, a circle, a UV sphere, an icosphere, a cylinder, a cone, a torus, a grid, and a monkey. Yes, you heard that right. So if I hit the delete key while I have this cube selected, delete, it gives me an option. I'm saying, do you want to delete? I can click yes, or I can also hit the X key, that also deletes, or the delete button that's over off to the right in the main part of the keyboard. So I have three keys basically. Oh, sorry, that's the only button. So the delete key that's normally the backspace key will not work.
No.
So the delete key above the arrows or the X key are both options to delete that center, that default cube. And from there, yes, I can put in a monkey head. Okay, this is Suzanne. She's kind of the most 3D applications use the Utah teapot. Okay, that was originally modeled at the University of Utah. They use it because it has some nice curves. It's really good for testing out lighting, and it'll cast interesting shadows. It'll have interesting reflections if you put a material to it. It's a good little test piece. Blender uses Suzanne the monkey head instead. And
Wait, where did you get that?
it's a primitive. It's right here. So if you just hit Create, you have this Create tab over here. If you don't have this Tools menu open, hit the T key. And the T key, right? T key. Get it? Because T key. Sorry. Okay. Then you just hit monkey. It's just click on monkey, and you can create a monkey there. Okay, I'm going to create a cube again, so I'm kind of back to the default. Now, I have a couple of other objects in my scene. Again, if I middle click, I can kind of tumble around in my scene here. This is a camera. Okay, by default, Maya doesn't provide you with a camera. That's just kind of a matter of preference. You may like it that way, you might like it this way. Either way, this is the way it does it in Blender. It provides you with a camera by default. So you can actually go to this camera's view and look through it, and you can animate the camera to, if you hit render, it's going to render from the camera's viewpoint, always.
Question on the camera.
Yes,
I've noticed that you can't rotate it so it's facing straight on.
you can, yes. So if you look at the transforms here, you'll notice we've got these rotations. The easiest way to get it facing absolutely straight on would be to zero these things out, at which point it's facing straight down, and then just pick an axis where you want it to be facing. Looks to me like up would be along the x-axis, so if I rotate it in x by 90 degrees, then it's now facing basically straight. So yeah, it gets a little funky to rotate the camera because it's not usually in a normal position. And you remember how I showed you that in Maya, when you're using the Move tool, you can choose to use a global axis, or you can choose to use the local axis for your object. So like if I wanted something to take off at an angle, and I didn't want it to just kind of stay at a weird angle, if I wanted it to look like it was flying with the length of it, then I would move it along its own axis instead of the global y-axis. The global y-axis points straight up. Its y-axis might be pointing at an angle. It would be pointing at the same angle that the object was pointing. So I'll show you how to move things in their local axis in Blender, but that's not quite yet. So one of the first things we need to do, you might be wondering how to get a 4-square quad viewport in Blender. That's not actually nearly as easy as it is in Maya. And the reason for that is it's not actually needed the way it is in Maya. Blender allows you to switch between named viewports extremely quickly. Okay, and you remember why is a named viewport important?
It allows you to see different sides without, well, so that you can like,
See the depth.
it just, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, it allows you basically to look at things objectively without having to try to guess at what illusion of depth you're being presented with. Okay, a named viewport, you usually want to be viewing it not in perspective. Now, does anybody see the name of this viewport on my screen? Top left, user perspective. User because it's pretty arbitrary here, right? I'm just kind of, you know, it's still user perspective. Wherever I decide to look, that's what this is. Okay, if I want a named viewport, then I have the following numpad keys. 1 equals right. 3 equals, no, sorry. 1 equals front. Where did I throw my eraser when it was useless? Have I got that right? 1 equals front. Yeah. One equals front. 3 equals right. 7 equals top. Okay. If you modify these with the control key, it makes them the opposite. So front becomes back, right becomes left, top becomes bottom. Okay. Now, there's a very, very, very important one that you're going to have to remember here as well, and that is 5. And these are all on the numpad, okay? Numpad. 5 switches you between ortho and perspective. Okay, and you guys, do you remember the difference between orthographic and perspective viewports?
No vanishing point.
Yes, orthographic dispenses with the illusion of depth. Okay, it only presents you 2 axes and everything is perfectly magnified. It doesn't try to make anything behind become smaller. Okay, so you can see this is a front perspective viewport. Or a user, now it's a user perspective because I tumbled in it, I dragged it. User perspective viewport. If I tap the 5 key, you see what happened there? The vanishing point went away. Things farther back no longer get smaller. You could actually fool yourself now, and people used to do this all the time in elementary school. You remember how you drew a 3D ice cube in elementary school? Does anybody remember how to do that? Right? You really, like if you were really cool, you did this all the time on your binder, on your trapper keeper. It's like, yeah, check it out, guys. And people would be like, oh my gosh, you're an amazing artist. Right, orthographic. Okay, you just see how well I lined those up? Hold on. My pride won't let me do that. There we go. But which end of this is the closer end? You know, is this the face that's closest to us and this one's down and to the back? Or is this the face that's closest to us and this one's up and to the back? You can look at it both ways. Likewise, you could look at this and you could say, okay, that's the inside of a 3-sided structure, and this is the farthest point away from me. Can you see it that way?
Yeah.
Can you look at it and see it that way? That's not what it is. Once we start moving and tumbling the view, we can tell the difference. But that's what I mean when I'm saying that an orthographic viewport dispenses with the illusion of depth. It's not going to bother trying to make you see it. But because of that, you can see things very accurately in relationship to one another. Okay, you can tell immediately if something is the wrong size because it will always appear to be the same size relative to everything else. It's never going to try to fool you that way with a vanishing point. So this is now a user orthographic viewport, and if I tap on my number keys, I'm still in ortho. Okay, front ortho, right ortho, top ortho. Hold down Control and tap those again. There's the bottom, there's the back, there's the left.
Now,
Okay.
when you're viewing that and hitting the control numbers,
Uh-huh.
you're talking about like on this keyboard, these
Yeah.
numbers, or on
Keypad. Okay, so Jeremy's raising a good point. What if I'm on a laptop?
you don't have those options,
You do,
but it's not.
but they're a lot less user-friendly. So, sorry, I didn't even think about that. But some of you are on laptops. You will need to go into the user preferences, and under input, if you scroll down, you will see that you have, where is it? Emulate numpad. If you don't have a numpad, you'll need to emulate one. That will allow you to hold down the function key. If I remember correctly, you can hold down the function key and use the numbers at the top of your keyboard instead. Same numbers, but they're not placed nearly as intuitively. You might have to hunt and peck. My advice to you, if you are in this boat, would be to get a numpad. You can buy a 10 key, a little USB one that will plug in and just keep it off to the right like a normal keyboard. It makes you so much faster. There also, I don't know if it's up to date still, but there used to be an app for the iPhone where you could kind of pair it with a MacBook Pro or whatever. Or actually, it might have even worked through Wi-Fi. It might have worked with a PC as well. I'm not sure. But if your iPhone was on the same network, you could pull up a 10 key on the iPad just for Blender. It was an app for Blender. So that's another option. But honestly, if you're using a laptop, I would either get a cheap 10 key keyboard from DI or something, a USB keyboard, or else get an actual 10 key for your laptop. That's going to save you so much aggravation to have those keys. So, yeah, that was a good question. So we're looking at orthographically here at things, and we have these keys here. We've also got our little create menu here. There is, however, a keyboard shortcut, of course, right? It's Blender. There's a keyboard shortcut. There's a keyboard shortcut for this create menu, and it is Shift A. Oh man, I almost got in trouble there. IFT. Shift A gets you your create menu. Why is that handy? Because sometimes you don't want to come all the way over here and click. So Shift A, if I decide that I want to create a cylinder, I can do it. Where's my cylinder?
Inside your cube.
It's inside my cube. So let's start talking about how to look at it. Okay, you've got these little menus down here. This little guy is your display method. And it will give you wireframe, solid, texture, material, rendered. Do those sound a little bit similar to what we were working with in Maya? Very similar. Okay, the difference is, well, the big difference is that every shaded viewport in Maya will try to approximate your lighting. Okay, every single one. So you're not going to have to worry about whether or not you're looking at an approximation of your lights. You just always are. Now, there are certain situations in which it will do a better job than in others. Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. Sorry. Shaded viewport will not. So texture will. There we go. Everything textured on up will try to approximate your lighting. So you'll probably spend most of your time in a solid, just flat shaded viewport like we're looking at here. Basically just uses a default Lambert shader. Nothing fancy about it, just kind of gives you a sense of the geometry. You'll probably spend most of your time either there or in wireframe mode. Okay? Wireframe mode allows us to see through objects, basically gives us X-ray vision. And the shortcut to alternate between these two is Z. Wireframe or solid. And if you don't want to learn the shortcuts, then you can always click on it down here. But it will cost you time in the long run. So wireframe, and look, lo and behold, there is my cylinder that I made. So everything is appearing at the origin, right? Just like in Maya, when we create something, it appears at the origin. Except we have another option. How many of you have right-clicked and seen that little sunspot thing move around and then wondered how on earth you get that back to the origin? Because that belongs at the origin mostly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a unique concept to Blender. And it is called the 3D cursor. Okay, not to be confused with the cursor that your mouse has, but the 3D cursor is a very, very important concept in Maya. The 3D cursor basically gives you an alternate origin. Okay, the origin is always going to be the origin. 0, 0, 0 in X, Y, and Z. That's the origin. But if you want things to spawn at a different place, move the 3D cursor. So if you create something, let's say I decide to move my 3D cursor over here, I'm just going to right click, there it is. And now, Shift A, I decide to create a UV sphere. That's where my sphere appears. Okay, that might not seem like too big of a deal to you, but that's not all you can do with it. Okay, you can snap that 3D cursor to a lot of different things. You can select an object and put the 3D cursor precisely on your selection. You can also, when you rotate and scale things, you can choose the 3D cursor as your pivot point instead of just the center of the geometry. That becomes a pretty big deal. So let's move this cylinder out of here. I'm just going to click on it and move it out, just kind of being arbitrary. I'm in a top orthographic view, so I know that nothing I am moving is moving in the z-axis, by the way, because that's how Blender behaves. It only gives me two axes at any point, and it's always a flat, just two axes, flat from my point of view, unless I specify differently. I could move these in Z by loading my cursor with the G key and then tapping Z for the Z-axis. I could absolutely move them in Z. I would not be able to tell that I was moving them because I'm looking straight down the Z-axis in my top orthographic view, and I don't have a vanishing point of perspective. But I can move them from here. Okay, so my 3D cursor is over here. If I click Shift plus S, no matter where I'm at, I get my options for the 3D cursor. Shift S. Okay, and down here, these bottom four options pertain to the cursor. These top ones are also pretty handy. I can snap, in other words move, my selection to the grid, to the cursor, or to the cursor with an offset. Okay? These are the four we're going to concentrate on right now. I can move the cursor to the selection. I can move the cursor to center, and that's usually what you end up wanting to do. You usually want to just kind of have it camp at the origin. The origin, the center, same thing. Move the cursor to the grid or move the cursor to the active element. So if I move the cursor to selected, you can see that it is now right in the exact mathematical center of that sphere I created. No matter what side I look at it from, the 3D cursor is right there. If I want to return it to the center, again, Shift S, cursor to center. Okay? So these are some important concepts. By the way, what did the other number pad keys do?
Incremental rotating.
Yep. They make rotating a lot easier If you've got your hands on the keyboard, you can rotate with the numpad rather than let go of the keyboard and use your mouse. So 4 takes you left. How's that for an L? Left. 6 takes you right. 8 takes you over. And 2 takes you under. Okay, there are a couple of other number pad keys that you need to know about. 0 toggles looking through the camera. The camera is always a perspective viewport, okay, unless you modify your camera object to be orthographic. Okay, anytime you're looking through the camera, you are looking through the simulation of a real camera. As in, it has a focal length, like a lens, it has a sensor size. Okay, unless you specifically tell it, I want my camera to be an orthographic camera, then it's always going to be a perspective viewport. There's one other key you ought to know about, and that's period. And that will zoom to selection. That's on the numpad. So if I just tap the period key here, then I zoom in on the sphere because that's what I have selected. Okay. Just like in Maya and most other applications, you can select multiples by shift clicking. Multiples. Okay. And here's a little bit of a different one. The A key will toggle you between deselecting or selecting all. If you have something selected, A will deselect it. If you don't have anything selected, A will select everything in your scene, including your cameras, your lights, everything. Okay? Any questions so far?
Duplicate an object.
Shift D.
Same thing? Oh, shift now.
Shift D. Yeah. Duplicate an object, Shift D, and same kind of thing. Duplicating an object loads your cursor. So, can I modify that? Absolutely I can. I can duplicate an object and load my cursor in just the x-axis. I can also specify that I want the offset to be 2 units. So there we go. Shift D X2 will put 2 spheres right next to each other perfectly along the x-axis, and they are mathematically kissing. There they are.
When you right click and change your center point, how do you get rid of that and change that back?
Shift S.
Oh my god, I don't want my camera.
Yep, Shift S and then click on cursor to center. Good question. Other questions? Okay, you guys want to know how to render really quick? It's easy. Over here,
Click the render button.
we've got this other tools menu, and the first tab in it is this little camera. Under there you have a little render button. And you've got render dimensions, 1920 by 1080. This is so important right here. Your render dimensions and then the percentage. Okay, so if I'm telling it to render at 1920 by 1080, and then my percentage of that is 50%, it's going to render at half this resolution, okay, which is, what, 540 by 960, I think. So if I hit render right now, there are my objects. Not a super amazing render. I don't have a ground plane, for instance. If I add a plane, let's see, I'm going to move it. Right now you can see it's in the middle of my object's height. So if I tap G, Z, -1, then goes straight onto the bottom. Now I can scale it. Let's go S10, enter. So now it's a big ground plane. Now if I render it, you can see that I have a ground plane, and lo and behold, the default renderer actually even casts shadows. So that's kind of cool. We don't have to do anything to get those shadows. They're just there. Okay, so tap Escape to get out of the render view. If I'm rendering an animation, then I use the animation button instead of render, but we're not there yet. Anyway, that's a 50% rendering size. If I want the full 1080p frame size, I need to either click in this and type 100, or else I can just kind of click and start dragging. Change it to 100. Any of these boxes you can click and drag in this way. So render, that makes a larger, higher resolution render for me. I can zoom in and out on it just like anything. Middle click if I want to pan around and look at things closer and kind of see how things are coming out. Tap Escape to get out. Tesla.
If you wanted to scale with just the keyboard, you want to scale like the whole thing, not just like in one axis. How would you do that?
Then don't specify an axis if that's the case. So just tap S10.
Okay.
S10, enter, will scale the whole thing in all axes by 10. Good question. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I take for granted that would be the apparent solution, but it's not. So, yeah, good question. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Is there an option to, with the tool axis and quantity, is there like, if you're trying to scale it, is there a button to just choose all, like X, Y, and Z?
No, you forgo specifying in that case. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, just if I want to scale this this cylinder by a factor of 2, if I want to double the size, I just have S2. If I want it to scale in all axes.
Scales from the center point.
Yes. Yeah, it scales from the center point out. Okay, one last thing I think we probably have time for, and that is editing an object. So far we've seen how to create primitives, but we haven't done anything about how to edit them. Okay, so that becomes fairly simple, and for this I'm going to simplify my scene here. I'm going to delete everything that might cause visual confusion and go back to just my cube in a flat shaded viewport. Maybe I'll leave the ground plane just for fun. But edit mode is accomplished in one of two ways. The way I like to do it is to hit tab. Okay, if I hit tab, I'm in edit mode. I'm going to write that nice and big here. Tab, edit mode. Okay, and it's as simple as that. You don't have to specify when you go into edit mode what particular type of component, whether it's vertices, edges, or faces, you want to edit. By default, it will go into vertices, but those are chosen right here. Vertex select. So shift-click for multiple modes if you want to edit multiples at different times. But I usually just like to do one. So here's faces, here's edges, here's vertices. Currently, everything is selected. Now here's something where Blender will work a little bit differently from Maya. When you were in edit mode in Maya, when you were in component mode, as they call it, you can actually still select another object. You cannot do that in Blender. Okay? And for me, I prefer it that way. I think it makes it a little bit of a cleaner edit, a little easier to edit precisely. When you are in edit mode on an object, you are editing that object. Okay? You cannot click away until you tab out of edit mode. Okay, so if I tab into edit mode on this cube, which I'm tabbed right now, this is a really, really important concept here. I can select, shift select these vertices, and I can start moving them around by tapping my G key and loading my cursor with them. Okay. Now, if I want to select the whole top of this object, see, somebody pointed out that, Scott, was it you that pointed out that things scale from the center? What if I want its bottom to stay where it is and I just want the top to go up? Well, I can just grab those vertices and move them in the z-axis, right? Okay, but here's the challenge. This is something that is so important for you to remember because if you don't, it will mess you up until you get it down. If I decide, well, let me show you a couple different methods of selection. B gives you a box selection. And in edit mode, that's really handy. Box selection.
Oh, yeah,
So-
dragging a marquee. That's really
Yep. If I tap B for a box selection, I come and I select the whole top of this, there's a problem. And that is that when I look up at the top, I can see I've only selected the front vertices. Okay? And here is why. Listen to this very, very closely because it's an important concept. In a shaded viewport, which is what we're looking at, in a viewport where it is solid, anything other than wireframe, you are only going to select what you can see. If you want to select in X-ray mode, you need to view in X-ray mode. So go to a wireframe view. Anybody remember how to do that?
Z.
Z. Yep, so tap Z, tap A to deselect all, and let's try a box selection here. And now you can see when I go up, I have the whole top selected. Okay? That X-ray selection can be extremely handy, or it can bite you in the rear end if you're not careful. So you've got to be really, really careful with it to make sure that you are selecting what you think you are selecting. Does that make sense? Okay, so from here, all of the same manipulation tools apply. I can move, I can rotate, I can scale. I can do so in any axis. So G, Z, 1, right? That cube is no longer a cube, it's a rectangle, and now it's 3 units tall because I just moved things 1 unit up in the z-axis, and it was 2 units tall, now it's 3. Easy, okay? So you can be extremely precise with this, and it's really, really fast once you get these keys down. Okay, and I know this seems like an awful lot like you're not going to sit down tonight and be a master of it and just be kind of going through. But once you've used this for a week or two, you'll find that this starts to come naturally, and you are so much faster than you would be if you were depending on the mouse. So this is a really, really fast and efficient way to model very accurately and very powerfully. It is 2:14. I'm going to let you go.